AdLib is the DSP-agnostic buying platform to scale your programmatic campaigns smarter, faster, and more profitably. AdLib helps independent agencies and marketers deliver premium programmatic performance without the complexity, cost, or overhead of traditional DSPs. Their platform provides the tools, data, and automation to run enterprise-quality campaigns, from CTV and audio to geofencing and YouTube, all under one roof with zero trafficking headaches. Plus, they're not just a platform, they're your growth partner. The AdLib team helps you win new business, expand budgets, and deliver measurable ROI that keeps clients coming back. It's time to unlock programmatic. Join leading marketers worldwide who are using AdLib to deliver more campaigns with better results. Check out getadlib.com.
Welcome to Open Market, a podcast about building companies in the advertising industry. I'm Joe Zappa, and I'm joined by Eric Franchi. What's up, Eric?
Hey, Joe. How you doing?
My voice is more nasal than usual today because I'm getting over a cold, and you already have this mellifluous, fucking honey, silky voice, and now I'm coming up against that with a further disadvantage. This is just another thing I need to overcome.
The secret is Diet Coke.
So just us today, we wanted to just hit a few topics that have been in our mind. The first one I had is business and luck. This is just kind of a building in public entrepreneur self-aggrandizement thing, because I see all the time in the like business media landscape, like I think people love to become like inordinately successful, and then like it's kind of like giving all your money away, you know, like you hit like $100 million, you're like, I guess this is enough, and you just start like giving it all away and talking about that. There's a similar thing with the way people document their success, right? And so like I hear Scott Galloway say this all the time. And to his credit, he doesn't do the total false humility thing, because he does own, and he's like, you know, I'm an animal and I'm very good at what I do and whatever. But he also always says, you know, like I got really lucky and whatever. And I saw like Sean, the guy, the CEO of Ridge, the e-commerce company, he did a similar post where, you know, he's talking about the success he experienced after like decades of grinding. And he's like, I got lucky. And I like, my take on this is, I think that, yes, of course, like anyone who's very successful, there's luck involved. Like we all know that. If you've had any kind of big success, you were in the right place at the right time or whatever. Also, the biggest luck you're ever going to have is foundational. It's like where you're born, like if you're born into an affluent family, etc. So like all of those things are true. But I think there's a lot of false humility in the like entrepreneurial media space, because people pat you on the back when you do that. And I think like the way to actually adjudicate the role that luck plays in business success is not to sort of abstract it and say like I was like born in America and whatever, though it's good to do that, like to acknowledge those things. It's to look at the comps, you know, like I would look at Scott Galloway and I would say, okay, yeah, I mean, born in America, born a white guy, like whatever, he had certain advantages. But I would say, I would compare him to his peer set, you know, and I would just say for people who like grew up in the same circumstances with the same advantages and disadvantages, what type of outcome did he have? And the reason I'm harping on this is that I think it's actually disempowering to entrepreneurs who haven't had their huge success yet, and other people who may not be entrepreneurs, when you overemphasize the role that luck played. Because in my experience, if you don't emphasize luck, which is out of our control, or randomness, and you instead emphasize the things that those people actually did do to become very successful, then you're giving people something constructive they can work with to become more successful in their own right. And that is what I see. And the people I know, yourself included, who have been very successful, is they basically have one thing in common. Like they vary in temperament, talent, all sort of background. But what they have in common is they're just extremely driven and they're obsessed with work. And they run at the wall over and over again until like one day they break through and have some kind of big success. The final thing I'll say about this is I've been thinking about it because I think it's very true of my personal area, which is marketing, which is to say it has never been easier to brute force your way into marketing success. Because in the olden days, 20 or 30 years ago, you needed third-party gatekeepers to make you successful. You had to hire a PR agency, whatever. You need to have an existing reputation, because the only people who could tell your story and sort of amplify your awareness were people who already had that audience, which would be like journalists or whatever, or event organizers. Nowadays, you can just go out there and build a reputation from scratch through sheer relentlessness. You know, that's how I built my reputation. We talked about a number of people in the industry who have done that. You know, Eric Tilbury, Jonathan Moffey, et cetera, many other people. And it's okay to do the thing and acknowledge your advantages and whatever, but it's also really important to focus on the constructive piece that people can control. And I think it's never been more true that your success is under your control. End rant.
Okay, I have thoughts. Can you define luck in the way you're talking about it?
Well, I would say luck is a random unearned advantage. That's what I think luck actually is.
I don't know. You mentioned something earlier around being lucky, being born in America, being born to maybe a two-parent household in a certain socioeconomic class. And my mind immediately went to people that are successful beyond the bounds of anything I can imagine, and they didn't come from those backgrounds. It's weird, right? Like, so the question is, and I realize like this is so many people are born in horrible circumstances and never make it out. But it's like Elon Musk wasn't born in America. Elon Musk, I don't know like the actual kind of upbringing he had, but it seemed like, like his dad was pretty tough, and maybe they weren't, in a two-parent household. And Mike Tyson, I mean, he had a horrible childhood, like horrible. And Alex Pereira, the kind of light heavyweight champion in the UFC, he was an alcoholic up until like the age of 30, and in like poverty in Brazil. So I don't know where I'm going with this, but it's like maybe as I get older, I just question like everything, and I even wonder if like growing up, in circumstances that we think are lucky might actually not be lucky at all. Because if you think about the people that that grew up with every advantage and they're not doing anything, or they're not where they might be.
This is a based take. Eric is like, actually being born in America affluent is a disadvantage because it makes you freaking soft.
Based Frenchie has entered the chat. Naval has this pinned post on X, which is titled "How to Get Rich Without Getting Lucky."
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with luck. It's a series of his meditations of observations around business. And you could just like, and they're very pithy and they're excellent. And a lot of it is just, talking about how to position yourself correctly when opportunities come to you. And maybe the thing that I've observed in my career, and this could be, very biased because it's things that I've observed about my career, is so much of this is about working and thoughtfully picking the market that you work in and working in it for a long time to allow the benefits of compounding to kind of take hold, and perhaps finding places where others aren't spending their time so you can take advantage of the asymmetric opportunities that are out there, and doing the things that allow opportunities to come your way because you deserve them. So I think we're saying the same thing, but I question the existence of luck at all.
Wow.
Like I know people who...
I wasn't prepared for this. As I said, this is based. I was prepared for you to be like, Joe, as the older, wiser person on the pod, you gotta chill out and just embrace the humility dance, and we all gotta do it and whatever. And you're like, I don't know if any of this shit makes sense. Like we're living in an Ayn Randian universe. We're just out here on our own figuring it out.
Or we're just living on this rock that's careening around this infinitely large universe, and we're just one of 8 billion, and we're lucky to be alive at its most basic. But at the end of the day, it's just making sure that you're making the right conscious decisions over time to put yourself in a position to have good fortune come your way and react the right way when it does.
I wrote about this in my newsletter, and I was talking about a client CEO of mine who, CEO of a public company, not actually one of the ones I usually talk about, so I'm not speaking in code. He, his company was already very successful. This guy is a killer, whole career, clearly worked extremely hard, has all the credentials, whatever, very smart, well-spoken guy. But his business went to a completely different level when an executive at a top 5 retailer heard him on a podcast. Like he just goes on this random podcast and someone happens to hear him on it, and then like shoots him an email, and then they sign their biggest customer ever, and the business like totally goes to another level. And yeah, so like that this is a perfect example, I think, this anecdote of like what people mean when they say that like success requires luck. That is absolutely those kinds of episodes that you can't completely control and that are a little bit random are a part of any successful person or company's arc. But of course, like the reason that guy was on that pod and the reason that that person reached out to him was because he had been honing his skills and his knowledge over the course of, 2 to 3 decades, making a ton of great choices, putting himself out there over and over again, no doubt being ignored and rejected many times along the way, whether it's a sales call or putting out a LinkedIn post no one pays attention to or whatever. And he just kept freaking coming back and getting better and better. And then when you do 100 pods, when you do 1,000 LinkedIn posts, when you do 1,000 sales calls, over time, the wins rack up and you get better and better. And what we call luck accrues. And that's just my point. Is like, I'm just harping on it because I think like I see so many people in my domain, which is again, marketing, envy someone who gets all the attention. And I'm like, look, I do this for a living. I'm never going to get a tenth of the attention as a couple of people in our industry who have huge advantages, who have built giant companies, whatever. But I've still made a really good living for myself and a really good business and a lot of like great relationships on the basis of putting myself out there over and over again. And so my job is to get other people to do that. My job is essentially to get other people to like be high agency and act in this way, right? And so I want to emphasize to them, being your own evangelist, putting yourself out there, making sure that people beyond the scope of your own company know who you are and think you're interesting and want to work with you. That is a way that you can make your own luck. And I just want to see people focus on that and not focus on, I was born here, I have this advantage and this disadvantage that's out of my control.
Yeah, you can't change where you were born, who you were born to, all of that stuff. What you're teaching your clients and people out there that listen to you, it's your version of Naval's pinned post, which is how to get rich without getting lucky. What your client experienced was the culmination of all of his version, assuming it's him, his version of, his meditations, his principles, his things that he enacted daily. And he put himself in a position to, benefit from just all of the randomness that happens in the world. So, we agree. We did agree.
We agree. And this little dialogue was like such a like classic, like Joe and Eric back and forth. And then I'm like ranting for like thousands of words. And you're like, we're on a rock hurtling through space. And I'm not sure luck exists. And I'm like, cool. I'll say 10,000 more words about that. But thank you. Thank you, Base Eric.
We're recording this the week that Spotify Wrapped came out. And, a lot of people were talking about Joe Rogan. And this is a little bit of a Rogan-esque take.
Yeah, totally. I saw the Q Adnon Twitter account was commenting on Eric Tilbury's pods being Marketecture Us and the Joe Rogan pod. And have you ever seen that like takedown or like the commentary in the Joe Rogan pod that's like, this is basically just Joe being like a caveman, like a fucking like tribal warlord, and like having all of the like academics and shamans of the time paraded before him. And they're just like, Joe think aliens build pyramids. And then the scholars just say all sorts of stuff. And he's just like, Joe like pyramids. Joe think aliens very strong.
That's ridiculous. I have not seen that, but it's absolutely hilarious. And I can.
It's really funny, and he rocks. Okay, the number 2 thing I want to discuss is sort of a natural development of the first thing, which is those who do not trust luck to build their fortune and instead take matters into their own hands and become their own evangelists are the greatest marketing weapon a company can have. Obviously, this is a stock argument of mine, so return listeners will be familiar with it. But I was just thinking about it in particular this week as I was watching Alex Karp, the Palantir CEO, on the Deal Book stage. He is just such a master at what I preach in terms of CEO evangelism, both in the sense of being the face of the company and getting out there and recognizing that the CEO has a critical role to play and a unique role to play in amplifying a company. And growing its supporters, but also in the way he designs his narrative, right? Like Palantir, actually, I think if you go to their website, I did a tweet about this. It like kind of sucks. Like the website is like, using data, or no, you know what it was? It was their CTO went on a pod, and the CTO was like, we use data to make better decisions. And I'm like, all right, I mean, sure, but that's like, it's super broad. It's uninspiring. Like 1,000 companies could say the same thing in different domains. But that is not what Alex sounds like at all. Like when you hear Alex and he's like, what are we doing? He is like, technological superiority, especially in the domain of warfare, is critical to the prosperity of any civilization. And we are participating in a civilizational battle for the West because we think the West has a benign influence on the globe as a whole. And if they do not have technological superiority in the domain of warfare, like Western values cannot predominate and be sustained, especially given the competition they face. And that is what we're about. And I'm like, every time I hear him talk about this, and to be clear, you don't even have to agree. Like you can have totally different politics than Alex Karp, but if you can't see how galvanizing that is as a message, right? This heroes and villains framework that he has, you're missing a great marketing lesson. And I think when I watch him, I'm reminded that nowadays, especially with the way communications works, with having first party channels at our disposal, there is no greater marketing asset than an evangelist CEO.
Yeah, I have so many thoughts on this. So the first is to connect it to something that you said several times in your advice to companies and founders, which is, you need to talk about the problem, right? You need to sort of like create the enemy. The enemy is the problem of your customers. And I think kind of attack it relentlessly. What's interesting with Alex is he does that, right? It's like a worldview about defending Western, democracies, right? So it's like it's instantly differentiating and polarizing. But because he takes those positions that you talked about around defense, geopolitics, surveillance, he instantly, well, number one, attracts attention, which allows him to, have this incredible reach. But then number two, he attracts the customers that Palantir wants, right? He talks about these topics like defending Western democracy. His client base is the defense industry and the government and, lots of other companies. But like, the polarization is actually a tactic for him because of the nature of the industries that he serves. So it's super interesting.
A subcomponent of what you said there that I would highlight is the attention thing, right? Like I always say, attention is the foundation of marketing effectiveness. If you don't have attention, metaphysically, as a fact, you cannot accomplish anything. If no one's paying attention, it doesn't matter how good the message is. And companies in our industry, by the way, ad tech, I would say 95% of them, they way over index on the specific words they're using. And they way under index on just like, is anyone paying attention to any of the words we say? Because if no one's paying attention to you, it doesn't matter how smart the words are. You're not going to achieve anything. Right. And so that's a value of having that provocative heroes and villains. What's wrong with the status quo and whom are we championing narrative is if you have that narrative and it's correctly calibrated, you will drive more attention and everything else you can achieve flows from that.
Yeah, exactly. 2 points, starting with the last one. You said that his CTO effectively said, like, we use data to make better decisions. Any company can say that. No company can match Alex Karp. No company has somebody that can talk about the mission, the identity, and like create this gravitational pull that we see developing like this year. This is like a 2025 thing. He's been around for 20 years. Companies were around for 20, 25 for years, but due to the performance of the stock and, the sectors that they play in, it's a very 2025 thing. No competitor is going to be able to match that. They're going to need to do something completely different, if at all, is thought one. Thought two is what's interesting is I don't follow Alex. I don't know if he has X or a LinkedIn, but what's very interesting is everything that we're learning about him is actually via earned media. He's interviewed relentlessly because he is so polarizing. He speaks so well. He's very animated. Today's memes on X are about him potentially being on stimulants or something like that because of the body language he was using at said conference that you spoke to. He's, one of the few CEOs that he is the marketing channel, but that marketing channel ends up being him plus earned media. And I probably just sort of kind of validates what we've been talking about, which is like, hey, you don't need the earned media. If you've got an interesting personality, something to say, can develop that narrative, like anybody can do this. But what's interesting is like he is that times 10 because of the power of earned media and the shareability and clips and all of that stuff.
Yes, and he runs what is now a $430 billion company that is like in the middle of the cultural crosshairs. So
of course everybody pays attention. Earned media knows that stuff.
And the natural takeaway for others, because 99.999% of CEOs are not in that position, is you're not going to get that. So you're going to have to go build that reputation. And thankfully nowadays you do have the channels at your disposal to go do that. If you're an ad tech CEO, of course you'll be able to talk to like the advertising press, which even that can be very hard in the beginning, right? You become more interesting to them as you become interesting. It's like dating, Eric. You know how people say like, if you want people to,
I wouldn't know anything about it.
If you want to be interesting, you have to be interested. Like you need to have like hobbies and things you care about and whatever, and then people will find you interesting. It's the same thing for CEOs who are trying to build an audience, be good at marketing. It's like, if you're saying really interesting, provocative, like insightful things on LinkedIn, reporters are going to want to talk to you. And that same dynamic is happening with Alex. It's just happening at the highest level because he's the CEO of a $400 billion company. But you can walk yourself there too, to return to topic one and taking control of your own destiny, if you avail yourself of first party channels, and eventually you'll get there in media as well.
Yeah. One final point on Alex, because this will play into that third thing you wanted to talk about, which is he defined the category and then the categories that he is addressing or building for Palantir. So AI for national security, I don't think that existed before Palantir. Decision intelligence, I think they invented that term, right? So it's very interesting when you do this right, you can create these spaces and by de facto be the leader and own the spaces because they didn't exist before you. So it's been very fascinating to watch him do this. Before we end, it's like one of these story stocks of 2025. I juxtapose it with AppLovin. And I sometimes wonder if Adam, who's the CEO of AppLovin, who I respect immensely, and I just wish he would talk more. He would be out there more. Yeah. And I wonder what AppLovin would be, if anything, right? Because the product itself is so performant. If they might be in a different position or even further ahead, if Adam were out there more.
Yeah, I can't speak to their thinking, but I think that something I've seen a lot is when companies achieve a certain level of success without being super out there, it can be very hard to convince them to do so because they end up having a culture of not being out there. And they're like, well, we haven't been out there and we're a $200 billion company. So I guess we'll just keep it rolling. But yeah,
and who are we, right? Who are we to say otherwise?
Yeah. Who are we? Yet we will.
True.
Yeah, no, I think you can end up drawing the wrong lesson from that, in that you can think, well, we've gotten so far, so let's just keep doing the same thing. But obviously correlation, not causation. That said, yeah, they're doing pretty well. So, Third thing, I've been thinking a lot about category creation because it's a conversation that comes up all the time with ad tech companies. They'll say, we don't really fit in this category, so we're thinking about creating a new one. Then I have to discuss with them about whether that's the right choice from a marketing strategy perspective. But also, we are in particular as an industry, given the AI boom and the creation of a new AI Lumascape, et cetera, at a moment where lots of companies are asking this question. They're either new and they're saying, how do we fit into the emerging AI native landscape? Or they're old and they're saying, do we need to reinvent ourselves to remain relevant in the future? And so I think creating a category is extremely hard. And I would say you basically need three things to create a category successfully. First, you need to be doing something genuinely novel. So the market can sniff lies, right? And unless you are like extremely influential or have like a ton of money, you're probably not going to succeed at sort of creating a new category when one isn't technically justified. And you probably won't succeed even if you do have a lot of money. So that's the first thing, is you need to be able to clearly state in a couple sentences, what are you doing now and what are you doing given the current moment with AI that you would not have been able to do before, and that justifies the creation of a new category. Okay, that's number one. Number two is you need an external force that is galvanizing folks in the industry, including your customers, partners, employees, analysts, to look for a new category. In other words, if you are just historically I don't know, let's say like 8 years ago, you were a DSP and you were like, I just want to create, like we have a slightly new feature or whatever. We want to like disrupt the DSP category and create something new, like a new kind of media buying platform or something. It probably isn't going to work because your audience, who needs to be the recipient of this message and needs to agree with it and amplify it, just is not primed for the creation of a new category. You are much more likely to succeed if there is in creating a new category, if there's something sort of in the culture and in the industry and in the tech landscape that primes people to accept a new category so that when you say you're creating a new one, they're open to it. And obviously that is why there is so much discussion about category creation in ad tech and other sectors of tech right now, is because AI is a paradigmatic shift that could lead to the creation of new categories. Third thing, even if you have genuinely new tech and people are primed for the creation of a new category, you need a lot of marketing and a lot of attention to create that new category. It is just very hard. People think in terms of the categories they know. And so it is very hard to buck the trend and get people to think in terms of a new category. So to do so, either you need a huge advantage and awareness machine, like a charismatic CEO with a large audience or a big marketing team or whatever, or you need to, and this is more likely the case for 9 out of 10 companies, you need to not create the category alone. You need to co-create it. You need to find what someone else is doing who has an even bigger audience than you and say, we are doing a version of that. And then you can differentiate within that new category, but you don't need to try to create it and make a new term stick on your own.
So is your advice, basically your advice is the latter, which is don't try to create a new category. Try to figure out where there's some heat, where there's some momentum, where there's potentially even an incumbent, and start to make your way into that category and seek to become a leader or one of the leaders in that category?
Yeah, I would say generally option 1, differentiate within an existing category. Option 2, which maybe 20% of the time is the right choice, is co-create a new category. Like Scope 3 is creating the agentic advertising platform, right? They're sort of leading the push for that new thing. Viant is reinventing themselves as an autonomous advertising platform, whatever. If you're a smaller startup or an existing company that just doesn't have the juice of those companies, I would try to glom onto that and then differentiate within that new category that's being co-created, because you'll benefit from the energy that the Vanderhooks or Brian O'Kelly is generating. And then the final choice is create a category de novo, like be your own vanguard. And I think that is just very hard unless you really have to hit all 3 of these things. You know, industry's got to be primed for it. Tech's got to be genuinely innovative, and you got to have some sort of marketing advantage.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. Because if I think about how, like, what's the most important thing outside of this, you know, kind of marketing stuff, it's like, what do customers think? How do customers evaluate you? How do customers like organize you? And 2 of the most useful tools for that is like, you know, the XY grid, which is, you know, like speak about the features and benefits and put yourself in the upper right and have everybody else, you know, kind of in the other quadrants, right? It's like, so it's actually develop a map of, you know, here's what the competitive landscape looks like, and we are highest and best for its reasons. Or it's like the grid charts, which show, again, the competitive set, who you might be, you know, making in your consideration set as a customer or even as an investor. We filled all the dots, and then, you know, everybody's got gaps there. So I would argue, or I would agree with you, but, you know, I would argue that like category means less than talking about like the challenges that your company addresses, the market that you're playing in, and you can kind of let the, you know, the other pieces fall together over time.
Yeah. I do think it's important to think in terms of categories, because I think most people just do that as a shorthand because there's no way to not. Like you just, you know, you can't keep 100 ad tech companies straight in your head if you don't think Viant, DSP, you know? So
no, it breaks during these moments though, because there's, you know, the AI Lumascape, it's filled with companies, and, you know, the first reaction came from Brian at Scope 3, and, you know, he pointed to there's categories missing. You could argue that there's like, this needs an entirely kind of different way of thinking. And Scope 3 in particular, I think they're in the custom algorithm bucket because they needed to be put into a box, not a bucket, a box because they deserve a spot on the landscape, but they don't do that. Like, it's one of the things that you can do with their technology. So it's just challenging during, times like this where it's exciting, where everything is just getting figured out, because it creates a lot of conversation around it, irrespective of anything else.
No, I agree. But I think really what that illustrates is that this is a time of tremendous opportunity, right? To market your way and to innovate your way into a new position in the landscape. So companies are right to be like leaning in right now and to be mixing it up in like the forums of public discourse. But yeah, my advice would be think about those three things: genuinely innovative technology, external force priming the market for a new category, and your marketing push. And if you don't have those three things, either differentiate within an existing category, or secondarily, and this will be the case for many companies right now, given that so many categories are being redefined or created, co-create and like take advantage of someone else's marketing push.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's is a great example of how this is being done by a cohort of companies is AdCP. So It's not a category, it's a working group for agentic advertising. But all of a sudden, there's an agentic advertising ecosystem that's being created together by these companies. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's almost like those guys have done that before. That the folks who initiated that shift. Yeah. All right. I think it's a good note to end on, Eric.
Agreed. This was fun. We'll see you next week, everybody.
Make your own luck. Be your own evangelist. Oog say evangelism good. Get on LinkedIn.
We're just floating on a rock.
Bye, everybody.